They never actually stop growing. So they grow very fast the first few years, and then it slows down as they get older. But theoretically, her longest day should be her last day. And so, like I said, if we get another 10 plus years out of her, she might put on another foot or so. Very possible. And like I said, why we have her out today is because she is shedding. And the shedding is something that, in most cases, is associated with growth. And so snakes have kind of a different type of skin than we do. So they have a layer of kind of like our skin that's underneath the scales, but then they have obviously this layer of scales that is over the top. And the scales do not grow with the snake. The scales are made of what's called keratin, so it's the same stuff that like your fingernails are made out of. And so in order for that to grow, basically they have to shed layers off the top of it and add layers onto the bottom. That's kind of how it works. And you'll see a very similar type of growth pattern if you go look at like the tortoise's shell out on the exhibit floor too. You'll see it kind of grows in these like rings. Snake skin does a very similar type of process. And so as she's growing, she has to slough off layers off the top periodically. So this is good, it's healthy, and you're seeing probably a lot of our animals out on the exhibit floor doing this right now, specifically because it suddenly has gotten warmer over the last like few weeks. And generally, if you're a cold-blooded thing like a reptile or an amphibian, your metabolism is very closely tied to the ambient temperature around you. So when it gets warmer, that kicks off growth spurts in a lot of them, and they'll all start shedding kind of at similar times a lot of the time. And she's no different. The other thing she has going for her right now, as far as shedding relatively frequently, probably more frequently than she normally would be, is if you take a look at her back, you'll see she has a handful of spots that are back here, and those are spots where she got burned by a heat lamp. So unfortunate care mistake on our end. It does happen. We do make mistakes here every once in a while. And what happened with her is that basically we had the wrong bulb in her lamp. And so we had a hotter bulb than what we should have had in there for how tall her tank was. And it was kind of unfortunate timing in that we noticed she was starting to get blisters on her skin kind of at the same time she was coming into a shed. And so generally, like common practice for snake care is if you notice some skin funk happening with your snake or from the same time that a shed is happening, you let the shed play out and reassess afterwards. And so with this, it was kind of, like I said, unfortunate circumstances where the thing that was causing the skin funk was actually an external cause that, or an environmental cause that was just making it worse at the same time. So we let her sit there with that heat lamp that was giving her blisters for like over a week. And so what we saw was basically she got all these little small kind of 50-cent piece size burns up and down her back because she would sit there under for a little while and get burned, then move a few inches and get burned again. Repeat for, like I said, a week and a half probably, and you get this. She's not sensitive on them anymore. This is something that happened probably a year and a half, about a year and a half ago at this point. And so these were second-degree burns, and so it's a cool kind of unfortunate thing that happened, but interesting educational point is that a second-degree burn in a human is something that we're probably going to be over in like a couple weeks. Like, get a second-degree burn, wait 2-3 weeks, and you probably won't even know where it was. But with her, like I said, we're a year and a half into this, and she still has these very visible spots. Because one of the things that's kind of interesting about the way snake skin works is that basically they can't heal an individual spot of skin. They, if they are going to heal, have to shed the entire thing, and then it will heal a little bit every time they shed. And so I said they'll generally shed when they're growing. The other context that they'll shed a bunch is when they sustain an injury like this to their skin. But when you're this big, that's a big metabolic load. That's a lot of skin that you got to replace by shedding it. So even her, when she's been kind of just like shedding on cool down basically as soon as she can, she's still shedding maybe only every 3 or so months. Because it's, like I said, it's a lot of material to have to make to just slough right off again. And so one of the things that occasionally happens with sheds, and it's not necessarily happening right now, is occasionally the shed will get stuck. And this is something that you'll see frequently in, like the biggest factor for it is humidity. So if it's in too dry of a place, a lot of times it'll have trouble shedding. And we do tend to have some humidity issues here, but that's probably not the case here. This is just, the timing happened to work out well with this show, so we're running it. And my name badge, there's the magnet for it. And so, generally, if a snake is having issues like humidity-wise, the easiest way to mitigate that is by adding moisture into the equation. And so you'll see us, like, what I've been doing with her for the last 2 days while she's been shedding is going in with a mister and misting her with some deionized water. And that's been helping her with it. But another real easy way to do it once they're kind of into the shed is just get a tub of water out. And so that's what we have here in front of me is just a tub of room temperature water here. Generally, if you can, you would want to go with a little bit warmer water, but that's a lot of water to have be warm and sitting out. And the other aspect of the water you want to be using is you generally want it to be dechlorinated. And so tap water has chlorine in it. And so generally the way that you are going to want to mitigate that is by setting the water out for several hours, up to like a day or two even. And the chlorine will evaporate out of the water. And so I put this out like right away when I came in this morning, so it's been out for, gosh, 6 hours now at this point. And so I care more about the dechlorinated aspect than I do the like warm aspect. Ideally you'd have both, but given my druthers, I'll take dechlorinated. And the reason I want to have it be dechlorinated is chlorine can be trouble for reptiles, particularly in the like kind of kidney area. So if she were to drink it, swallow a bunch of it, it could be a problem for her internally. The other aspect of it is snakes don't have any eyelids, and chlorine can be irritating for eyes, as you know, anyone who's opened their eyes up in a pool can attest to. And so she doesn't have the ability to close her eyes, and so we want to be making sure we're protecting her from chlorine insofar as we can.
And we're having the camera won't focus.
Camera won't focus. Okay.
That's better anyways.
Alright. And so, what you'll see me doing here, and if you do have a critter that has a stuck shed, generally you don't ever want to be peeling. Like if you're having to like pinch and pull and peel, it's probably too early for that skin to be coming off and you're probably doing more harm than good. So with any critter here, like if it's to a point where it's like actively coming off like it is with her, generally you're going to be ready to go, but you'll see what I'm doing is I'm not grabbing or pinching, I'm just rubbing. And so I'm just very gentle but firm, kind of just giving her a pet down the back here and letting the skin kind of come off as I'm petting her. And boas are relatively comfortable in the water. You wouldn't know it from how she's kind of trying to scramble out of here right now. But they are very good swimmers. We've even had ones here before that like when it's time for a shed, they'll just sit fully inside their water dish for like days at a time. She doesn't quite do that. She doesn't have a big enough water dish for one. But like I said, they are very adept swimmers. You can see a big, nice piece of skin that was kind of the stuff that was already peeling off there. And they can't feel anything in this. Like I said, it's made out of the same stuff that like your fingernails are, so they don't have nerve endings in that particular part, so I don't worry too much about like tearing parts that are already loose. Like I said, there's nothing sensitive in there. It's more a matter of if it is still relatively well attached to the scales below it, I don't want to damage those scales as I'm taking it off. Is the biggest concern. And that can be a, calm down. The other thing you'll see here is that, you know, a lot of people are afraid of snakes, and especially a snake this big, they assume is going to be aggressive or mean towards a person. And you can see she's absolutely in a position where she would rather not be in. But she's not striking at me. She's not being aggressive. She's just trying to get away. She knows that, you know, in a 1v1 fight, I'm going to beat her every time. So she's not really necessarily really trying to fight me here. And if she really, really, really wanted me to leave her alone, what she's more likely to do is do a big waste dump. She's going to poop and pee all over the place. And that's going to be my biggest, easiest signal that says, okay, she's done here. She doesn't want anything more to do with me. But as long as she's just hanging out and kind of crawling around, and you know, she can try and not be in the water, that's fine. I can just keep tossing her back in there all day if we need to. But as long as she's not feeling threatened in that way, I'm comfortable doing that. And so some of that is just knowing and recognizing what those type of postures and positions are with snakes. So like she's in a position where even if she wanted to lash out at me, she couldn't. Like she's not cocked back. They have to make kind of a little S curve in the top of their neck when they actually want to strike, and she's not in a position to do that at all right now. Instead, she's just hanging out. And so, I think if any of our guests want to come and get a little bit of a gentle pet in here, I would say that's okay if you're comfortable touching a wet snake. You want to try?
There's a very large bug.
It's just a fly.
Yeah, I
Maybe she'll eat it.
So what do I do?
So yeah, we'll just pet her on the body,
It's like a bee.
and we'll try and go to the areas where it's fine. It's just a deer fly or something.
Do we grow deer flies?
What's she feel like?
Wet.
Wet, yeah. It's funny because like normally the type of feeling that I like am trying to discourage people from like assuming they have is slimy, and can't really do that right now when she's kind of wet because I dunked her in a pool of water. But normally they're very dry, they're very smooth. You'll find with these bigger, heavier snakes, your boas and pythons, they're kind of squishy. Particularly the females carry quite a bit of body fat on them, and so they end up being kind of squishy. The other thing that you can maybe see in our shed here is, you can see right here, is where one of those scabs are from where she got burned. So you can see that comes off with the shed. And there still is, you know, a spot back there. Like I said, she's got to work through it at her own pace here. So it gets a little bit better every time. Kind of another interesting thing with that like shedding to heal thing. It makes surgery on snakes being an exceptionally kind of challenging thing to do, because what'll happen is you'll put stitches in them and then they'll shed their stitches out right away. So snake surgery is notoriously kind of a hassle. Other aspect of this is something you've probably all seen in your own life and maybe never wondered what the deal is with it. You ever notice how like on the hospitals there'll be, you know, the cross that has the two snakes going around it? Snakes in a lot of pagan cultures were very closely associated with healing because of the shedding aspect of it. And so that's just like a relic of that that's been going for the last 2,000 plus years, is this like pagan European association of shedding the skin to heal and being associated with healing and doctors that we still are running with to this day. And so I think I'm just going to keep sitting here with her, let her kind of just run her through my hands here and let the skin come off as it comes off. So then generally when snakes are shedding, we generally don't handle them. The biggest reason for that is they can just be a little ornery, a little on guard when they're during a shed. And the most pertinent part of that is that, again, we mentioned snakes don't have any eyelids when we were talking about chlorine. They actually shed a layer off the top of their eye when they shed too. And so they'll spend a lot of the kind of pre-shed time not being able to see very well because their eyes get all clouded up when they're shedding. And so when they are in that kind of cloudy, can't see phase, they sometimes can be a little extra defensive, a little extra ornery. Back in there. Then her front half is already done shedding. Like, I'm not trying to throw her in here specifically for the sake of like, this is gonna help her shed up in this part. It's kind of something that is like directly applicable to the spot that is actively shedding. I more just don't want her getting out onto the floor and slithering away on me. They're faster than you would expect when they actually get going. And if she gets into like this, good luck getting her out of there. So that's more what I'm doing here. Any of you guys have any questions? Any of you guys have snakes at home that you've had as pets or anything?
I wish.
Almost done, actually. So the other kind of neat part with the skin that you pull off is that you can still see the pattern on it too.
Yeah.
I should have rolled my sleeves up before I did this. It'd be all wet. Oh, hush. So that wasn't a hiss. You might have heard a little bit of a hissing type noise happen back there. Kind of a common thing that a lot of pet boas have is, and another common thing that happens in the pet trade is they end up getting kind of inbred a lot of the times. And so you'll see a lot of them are kind of subject to a lot of the same diseases that they wouldn't necessarily be as subject to in the wild. And one of the things that a lot of boas have is respiratory issues. And so you'll find them being kind of wheezy, kind of stuffy nose, wheezy a lot of the times. It's a very common boa thing, and that's what you're hearing there. There we go. We had a completely, oh, nope, not quite. We got another couple inches at the end there. So, common spot for it to get hung up, that's the cloaca. So that is kind of an all-purpose exit that they have. It's where they mate with, it's where they lay eggs, it's where they poop, where they pee, it's all one orifice for them. Again, we're the weird ones in that we use a multiple exit system. Most things only have one. But because it's a little bit of a different kind of texture change as it goes over, a lot of times the sheds will break on there. That's an area that sometimes needs particular attention. There we go. Here's our last, call it 9 inches, maybe foot maybe. Where are you going? All right. And there we go. That is a fully shedded snake. And we'll probably give her the rest of the day off here as far as coming out and visiting, but she'll be probably ready to come out again tomorrow. And so, for our audience out there on the internet, thank you for watching. You can tune into these, like I said, every day at 3:30. If you're following us on Twitch, go follow us on Facebook and YouTube. And if you're following us on Facebook, go to the other two, etc., etc. Big shout outs to the Beltrami Electric Co-op for underwriting a lot of these shows. Thank you to them. And tomorrow it's going to be Anne. I don't know what she's going to be talking about, but it's going to be one of our newer staff members here, Anne, talking about something tomorrow. She does a lot of stuff with like language, has been her kind of shtick, so if that sounds interesting to you, tune back in tomorrow. Even if it doesn't sound interesting to you, tune back in tomorrow. You might